NASCAR confiscated the roof rail deflectors from StewartHaas Racing on Friday, and Kraus will join Kaulig Racing on a part-time basis in the NASCAR Cup Series. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to talk about Daytona 500 ad revenue, as it was reported by Adam Stern that Fox booked some $24.3 million in ad revenue during last year's Daytona 500. I believe that led also into this year's Daytona 500 as well. That is quite a bit of money, and that's why we saw a lot of commercials during the Daytona 500 this year, especially when it comes to Wendy's. I think there were some Coke Zero commercials, which we saw some new ones come out this year, and there were other big companies like Geico that really brought in a lot of money as well for the Daytona 500. That is still a lot of money, though, and that's probably why we saw a lot of full-screen commercials. I really hope with the next TV deal that they do find a way to have less full-screen commercials, because there were too many of them during the Daytona 500 this past year. I really hope they end up doing it, because in my opinion, I think there were way too many full-screen commercials during this year's Daytona 500, but when you have that much ad revenue, you do have to sadly play a lot of commercials. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Walls. Now, Bubba Walls is coming off of finishing in 5th place once again at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And currently right now at the moment, Bubba Walls is the only driver with the perfect score of having top 5s. Bubba Walls is not only a driver that has 2 top 5s at the moment, he's the only driver that's had 2 top 10s to start the year, and both those, like I mentioned, have been a 5th place finish, meaning Bubba Walls, I believe right now, might have the best average finish of any driver in the field. A really good start for Bubba Walls, who last year, if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think Bubba Walls had a top 20 finish in the first 2 races last year. So this is a really good start to the year for him. And like I mentioned, he's 4th in the standings, only like 20 points back of Kyle Busch, who is a regular season points leader. This is a really good confidence booster for him. And you look at tracks coming up. We'll be headed to Las Vegas next week, a track where Bubba Walls has been pretty solid historically at that track. And we know how fast 2311 Racing has been at that track since going there. Then, of course, they've got other tracks coming up where they're going to be good. You've got tracks like Phoenix, where I think Bubba was pretty solid in the first half of the event. And I think Bubba will have a pretty solid year, and this is a really good start to the year for him. He did say coming this year that he's expected to have a much better season than previous years. And so far, he's proven that by having 2 top 5s and 2 top 10s to start the season in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about David Croft. As it was reported on Motorsports.com that David Croft will miss 3 F1 Grand Prix in 2024 for Sky Sports. This is going to be the first time since David Croft took over as the Sky Sports commentator, the lead commentator for the F1 races, that he is going to miss. He is going to miss the OMalley Romano Grand Prix, he is going to miss the Austrian Grand Prix, and the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku. I can't remember who is going to replace him in those few races, but this is absolutely a huge deal. The reason he basically explained the reason why he is not going to be at those races, he wants to start focusing more on his family. He's been doing this for a very long time, and also when you look at the Formula One schedule, it is getting longer and longer on a year-by-year basis, and the grind is getting longer. So that's another massive reason why we are seeing him make the decision to go ahead and focus on spending a little more time with his family. And I think David Croft is 50 or 51 now, so he's getting up there in age a little bit. Though he still has a long way to go as a commentator, I completely understand wanting to spend time with your family, especially with the fact that David has been doing this for such a long time. He's been doing F1 commentaries on radio and that stuff for many years. So I think he's earned the opportunity and the right to go ahead and do this, and I completely understand him making a decision to back up a little bit and scoot back a little bit in regards to that and just back off a little bit on commentating for a few races. And I think this is going to exacerbate, and I think it's going to grow on how many races he is going to miss. I think it's a good decision for him, especially with his career in Formula One. I think he'll still be eventually going back full-time, but I think right now he wants to spend a little more time with his family. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Roger Pensky. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern, I believe it was last night, right before the Daytona 500, that Roger Pensky says we need to take EV mandates out of California, and says that renewable fuels are the key for the future of cars. Now, obviously, this has been a massive debate that has been going on over the course of the last few years. EVs have not grown as much as people expect. Now, car sales, according to what some people are saying, are up for electric vehicles, but when it comes to electric vehicles, they do cost a lot more than a regular gasoline car, especially from what people said. Apparently, the batteries cost a ton of money for them as well, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people are against EVs. And a lot of people are going more towards renewable fuels. We see Mercedes back off, and we now know that Chevy and I think Honda are working on a project together to work on a renewable fuel project. I think we're getting to the point now where I think EVs, because right now they're just, the grid is not sustainable for electric vehicles fully. I think eventually it could if they could find the grid being sustainable, but right now I think it's just a little too soon to be going fully EV, but that's California for you, so I'm not shocked or surprised to see this, but I 100% agree with Roger Pensky. I do believe that electric vehicles right now are a little bit too soon to go fully. I think 10, 15 years down the road it could be something to watch for, but right now I think it's a little too soon to go fully electric vehicle on everybody else. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, during the media days yesterday, Kyle Busch basically called out the fuel saving during the Daytona 500. And he called it disgraceful and said it's something that the fans really did not enjoy and watch. But he doesn't really know a solution to the problem on how to fix the issue. Obviously, we've seen a lot of drivers complain about the fuel saving stuff. We saw, I think, Bubba Walls complain on door bumper clear. We saw, I think it was Denny Hamlin on his podcast complain about it. We saw Eric Jones complain about it. A lot of drivers complained about the fuel saving stuff that was going on during this year's Daytona 500. Well, as much as I understand the drivers being frustrated and they wanted to go full out, let's be honest with ourselves. These drivers were not going to go flat to the floor, foot out for 200 laps in 500 miles. You're going to have a lot of wrecks. You're going to have a lot of torn up equipment. And they have to remember that Atlanta Motor Speedway was the next week after that. So as much as I do 100% understand the frustration from all these drivers like Kyle Busch, and I get that he feels like it's disgraceful that they couldn't race side by side the whole entire time like they did earlier this evening at Atlanta, this just wasn't sustainable for the Daytona 500, and it is a bigger track with a lot more crash damage and a lot more money as well coming into play. So again, I understand 100% they want to race flat out from the get-go, but again, it's just not sustainable, and it wouldn't be possible for them to do that. So in my opinion, I get the frustration. There's talks of a smaller fuel cell, which is something they could do, but I don't know exactly what the solution would be to the problems when it comes to that. I think you're still going to have that issue come into play, especially as we get farther into the season on these other super speedway races. But I do get Kyle Busch's frustration overall. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeffrey Earnhardt. As it was announced a couple days ago that Jeffrey Earnhardt will be behind the wheel of the 26th car for Sam Hunt Racing for 3 more races this year. He'll race at Talladega in the spring, then he'll race at Daytona in August, and then he'll race at Bristol in September. Jeffrey did run the number 26 car at Atlanta. I believe almost finished in the top 10, and this will be, like I said, his first of 4 starts that he made. Forever Lawn, which has been a loyal sponsor to Jeffrey's the last couple of years, will be his sponsor. I think Jeffrey is a very solid driver who can get the best out of equipment if he has good enough equipment to be competitive. But the one thing about Jeffrey is that he sometimes has also underperformed in the equipment that he has been in. So I don't expect Jeffrey to absolutely set the world on fire. Obviously, Sam Hunt Racing has cut back a little bit on their equipment at the moment. They still have a lot of equipment that they're going to use. Of course, one full-time car. They sold that other charter, the 35 car, which the owner's points over the 35 that Frankie Muniz is going to be driving this year. But I am happy to see that Jeffrey at least will have some races to run with this team this year. I think he will do a solid job with Sam Hunt Racing. He's driven for them before, and I think he'll have a much better season with Sam Hunt Racing than he did have, of course, with Alpha Prime last year, considering that team was definitely behind in performance. I think it's not a shock or surprise, though, to see that he definitely will probably do pretty good with the team in 2024. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeffodine. Now, Jeffodine was being interviewed in the media center earlier today by many media members, and he is basically for going back to Rockingham Speedway, and it says he is on board with bringing Rockingham back. There's been a lot of talk about the return of Rockingham Speedway over the course of the last couple of years, and especially in the last couple of months or so. We know that people from Rockingham County that are from that area have absolutely been pushing for this track to get back onto the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. Now, they have been there in the last 20 years. Obviously, the Truck Series ran there in 2012 and 2013. But the last time the Cup Series ran at Rockingham Speedway was only back in the year 2004, where we saw a photo finish between Matt Kenseth and Casey Kane. It is really sad to see that we haven't been back at that racetrack, and I do agree with most people in the industry. I believe that Rockingham Speedway should make a return to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. I think the racing would be pretty good. I know it's a 1 mile racetrack, but I think the racing would be really, really strong there. They'd be able to run intermediate package, and it's been generally pretty good with the intermediate package. And tire wear would be through the roof, which would make the racing also a lot more fun as well. I do agree. I really hope that we return to Rockingham Speedway because, like I said, I do believe the racing would be amazing and overall will be fun to watch. So I hope they do return to Rockingham Speedway. I want to see it come back. And like I said, let's hope and pray that we can see a return of Rockingham Speedway to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Quall. As it was announced on Thursday afternoon or Thursday late morning that Carson Quall is going to drive the 88 car for Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series and make his Xfinity Series debut at Martinsville Speedway. For those who do not know who Carson Quall is the son of Travis Quall, is an up-and-coming talent who has also made a Truck Series start for Spire Motorsports last year at Bristol Motor Speedway and had a pretty solid run and nearly got a top 10 finish there in his debut. He also currently competes full-time in the Cars Late Model Tour for Junior Motorsports and has, I think, won some championships in the local scene as well. I am really excited about this. I think Carson Quall is one of the best talents that is coming up through the ranks of racing currently at the moment, and I do sincerely believe that Carson Quall will be a contender in this race for at least a top 10 or top 15. Realistically, I know it's a Junior Motorsports car, and we know historically that Junior Motorsports has been strong and very, very good at this racetrack, but I do not believe that Carson Quall is going to win. Realistically, I think the goal for his debut is to finish in the top 15. And I do think at some point later down the road this season, I think that Carson Quall will make some more starts in that car this year. He'll probably make 4 or 5 starts, and eventually, I wouldn't be shocked, surprised maybe next year if Carson Quall is going to be full-time in Xfinity. There was even talk and chatter last year that he was going to be full-time in Xfinity. It may have been a rookie with drivers like Shane Van Gisbergen and Jesse Love and Haley Deegan. There was a chance that he was going to be full-time in Xfinity, but of course, that did not happen. But again, though, like I said, I'm very happy to see Carson Quall get this chance and opportunity, and I do really believe that Carson Quall will be able to make the most out of it this time around. I'm excited to see him get the chance and opportunity to work with Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series at Martinsville Speedway in a couple months. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. As it was confirmed on the broadcast booth by Adam Alexander that Aric Almirola is going to drive the 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This will be the first of around 15 or 16 scheduled races that Aric Almirola is going to have with Joe Gibbs Racing this year. Remember, he left StewartHaas Racing at the end of last year to basically run only part-time in the Xfinity Series, so he's still going to run a majority of the schedule in 2024. He will make most of his starts in the number 20 car. I think his first start is either going to be Richmond or Texas, and he's going to run a lot of races there. As for Aric Almirola's chances to contend for the victory, because I do believe that Aric Almirola is going to have a chance and opportunity, I think he will be a pretty big threat and contender to potentially get that first Xfinity win of 2024. And like I've already mentioned and said probably multiple times, I do believe that Aric Almirola will be contending for the win overall on Saturday afternoon. Again, the Xfinity Series has a lot more competition this year with guys like Shane Van Gisbergen, Jesse Love, Haley Deegan, other drivers coming up to the ranks, and there's probably even going to be some Cup guys that are going to run this race as well. We know John Hunter is going to be in this race. We know that Austin Hill is going to be here. Chandler Smith's going to be here. It's going to be a very stacked field that Aric Almirola is going to have to go up against. But if there's anybody that can get in that car and run really well, it is definitely Aric Almirola. So I really hope he can make the best of it and have a really strong run with that team this upcoming weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. But trust me, I don't think he's going to have to worry because I do believe he'll be a threat and contender for the win overall at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. Now, there were a lot of penalties that are expected to come out this week, and one of those drivers that's expected to receive a penalty is Joey Logano. Right before the green flag dropped in today's NASCAR Cup Series race, Joey Logano, it was revealed by Bob Pockrass and many reporters in the industry that Joey Logano was expected and would have to drop to the rear of the field and also would have to serve a pass-through penalty at the start of the race. The reason is because Joey Logano had gloves that were webbed and were messed with. The reason being it seemed like to get a competitive advantage. According to the rules, it was also against the SFI code, which is, I think, the Safety Fire Instruction Code or something like that. That is part of NASCAR's rulebook. That's another reason why he had to start at the tail end. Now, he got very lucky because a caution came out of lap 3 when the big one struck, so it really saved his race. Drivers like Chase Elliott were involved in that crash, and I think Austin Dillon got collected, and Alex Bowman's race was also pretty much over as well from that wrecking incident. Look, we have seen a lot of drivers trying to get advantages, and when you saw the video that surfaced from Fox, his glove definitely looked really, really strange, and I think Larry even mentioned it that he probably wasn't going to be using it during the race, but you can't have these kind of altered things. This is part of the rule book, and it's probably going to result in Logano getting a penalty. I don't know if I don't think, it's not a single source part, I don't think Joey Logano is going to get like an L2 or L3 penalty, but I certainly would imagine that Logano is going to at least be getting an L1 penalty. And because of the fact that it was altered, it's going to hurt him in a big way. He's probably also going to lose playoff points, which I don't think Logano really got any stage points. And Logano did not have a really good run in both races. Got crashed out at Atlanta and finished like 10 laps down. It did not have a very good run in the Daytona 500, which he did have one of the best cars, but got crashed out in that. I really hope Joey Logano can turn the season around, but he was one of the guys who I had thought would go to the championship for, and there's a chance and possibility with this penalty that could be coming his way. It might cost him already. So it's a big story to keep an eye out on for sure, and we'll see if Joey Logano is going to receive a penalty from this. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bailey Curry. Now, Bailey Curry could be among the many drivers that might be getting penalized later this week. During the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, around 45 to 50 laps to go, the caution would come out. The reason was because Bailey Curry had his roof fly off during the Truck Series race, meaning that basically he was trying to bring the convertible series back. In all seriousness and all honesty, that would end their race. And I know that Jamie Little and those guys up in the booth were trying to say, well, he's going to have to continue with this now. No, he's not continuing that because the truck is not going to be sustainable to go ahead and run. And I think it was the right decision to pull off the racetrack. Again, that is extremely dangerous, and I'm really surprised that NASCAR did not black flag Bailey Curry for that. They should have parked him for that because, I'm just saying, because they were playing Flexgate. We saw this in multiple teams. We're going to talk about that here later in this episode when we talk about Lane Riggs. I do believe that they were playing Flexgate and they were trying to mess with the cars and the trucks to try to get an aerodynamic advantage. But I think that was exactly why we were seeing roofs fly off, and it wasn't a really good thing in tech inspection. Again, they are expected to have an inspection process done, and the penalty will be either coming tomorrow or will be coming on Wednesday. My best guess is late tomorrow, but it might come out on Wednesday. So it's a big story to watch out for sure. We'll see what penalty Bailey Curry ends up getting. I would imagine because it is the Truck Series, it's going to be a little smaller than a Cup penalty, but I still think because it is the Truck Series also, for their sake, it's probably going to be like a 25-point penalty for the team and probably maybe a $50,000 fine or a $25,000 fine for messing with that because, like I said, that is extremely dangerous and someone could get seriously hurt. In fact, it actually hurt a truck because Ty Dillon got a ton of damage in that race. A really bad call on the team's part to mess with that because it could damage a lot of trucks and destroy a lot of trucks in the process as well. A really bad move for the team and it just unfortunately cost the driver a shot at potentially picking up a win and a victory. I think that really cost Ty Dillon a shot at contending for the win, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt DeBenedetto. Now, according to Steven Trando from CBS Sports, Matt DeBenedetto was at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Now, apparently he has no rides still currently at this moment for 2024, but apparently he was on pit road. He actually took a video on his Instagram page, I think, on his story, basically speaking with Ryan Ellis walking down pit road because he basically called Ryan Ellis his PR guy still to this day, even though Ryan Ellis is full-time at Alpha Prime Racing. Meanwhile, Matt DeBenedetto is basically still ridless currently at the moment. There's rumors that there could be some trucks for some Truck Series races at Vegas. It could be filled up because apparently NASCAR is trying to ask a lot of these teams to run extra trucks for some of these guys. Look, Matt DeBenedetto, I do believe, should be in the Truck Series or at least racing in NASCAR. He is too good of a driver, in my opinion, to not be racing. I understand what all went down. Look, he was supposed to go to Kaulig Racing this season. He was supposed to drive for them on a part-time basis in Cup. He had a sponsor that was signed for the season, and unfortunately that sponsor kind of lied, as what Matt DeBenedetto said, and that's why the sponsorship deal sadly fell through, and that's why Matt DeBenedetto is not running full-time or at least part-time this year in 2024. We do know that Chris Rice did say a couple weeks ago that he's still talking to Matt DeBenedetto, and they might make a few starts with him this year, but that still has not been announced up to this point. And with the number of races in Cup that are filling up relatively quickly for the 16 Cup car, I'd imagine unless he gives them the 13, I'd imagine that probably will not happen this year. And it's a shame because, yes, Matt DeBenedetto absolutely 100% made a lot of mistakes. There's no denying that. But I do believe that Matt DeBenedetto does deserve a second chance and opportunity to be racing in the series. The guy got to the playoffs last year. He was able to finish inside the top 10 in the standings and nearly made it to the round of 8 and nearly knocked off the guy who actually went on to win the championship, that being Ben Rhodes. I really hope Matt DeBenedetto does get a second chance. It's good that he's still allowed inside the garage and is allowed to show up there. I really hope Matt DeBenedetto does 100% get a chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel of a ride, regardless of what series. I don't care at this point, but I do believe, and I agree with most people, that he should 100% be racing in NASCAR currently at the moment. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lane Riggs. Now, I did talk about the story, I believe, yesterday evening after the Xfinity Series race concluded, but Lane Riggs was actually disqualified at Atlanta Motor Speedway on Saturday. The reason that Lane Riggs was disqualified was because of the fact that the windshield fastener bolts were not secure and safe. That meant that the windshield could have absolutely flew off, and I think the same situation that happened to Bailey Curry could have happened to Lane Riggs as well. And what they were doing, they were trying to get a competitive advantage. This is not a really good start for Lane Riggs this year. Lane Riggs did not have a good race at Daytona, got taken out of the race early because of damaged vehicle policy. He didn't really have a good run going to begin with, was going to finish 23rd or 24th, but because of that, he didn't get any stage points he had actually earned, and is now in the bottom of the standings, which isn't very good. This is also the second of the last 4 races where we've seen the 38 truck actually get disqualified. Basically for the same thing, because remember last year Homestead, and we talk about this on the channel later during championship week or the second to last race of the year, that Zane Smith got disqualified for windshield fasteners as well, which again is something that you're not supposed to mess with. That is in the rule book. Again, it was to try to get a competitive advantage, and they were sadly disqualified because of that. Well, it's not sadly if you aren't a fan of the 38 team, but I feel bad for Lane Riggs because Lane Riggs is not the one working on these trucks. He's not the one doing the parts and pieces. He's just a guy driving behind the wheel. I know he's worked on cars before and all that stuff. I just feel bad for him because he does deserve a chance and opportunity to be in this series, and I think he's going to bounce back as the year progresses, but we're getting close to the point now where we're going to start having races like COTA where there's going to be more injuries showing up than allowed, and I think that's going to put them in a position if they don't qualify well, which I think hurt them in a big way. So I really hope, like I said, that there can be a little bit of a bounce back season for this team. They haven't had a great start to the year and season. Again, I really hope it's a bounce back time because I do believe that we could see a pretty solid year, all things considered, for this organization and team if they can get their shit together and stop making mistakes and doing dumb things like not having their car secure or truck secure, because that is going to hurt the team in the process as the year progresses. I don't think they're going to appeal the DQ. I think you had to appeal either by today or maybe Tuesday. You got to appeal, and I think there's a good chance they're not going to appeal the DQ because they're instantly going to lose the appeal and not get it back. So I don't expect them to appeal, but it's definitely a story to watch out for sure as the week goes on. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Amazon. Now, there's been a lot of talk and chatter over the course of the last couple weeks surrounding Dale Earnhardt Jr. The reason being is because Dale Jr. has not signed any contract extension with NBC when it comes to broadcasting. And we still don't know for sure if Dale Jr. is going to be back at NBC even this year because the contract with NBC had ended at the end of last year. Well, according to Adam Stern, Amazon could become a player to pick up Dale Jr. in 2025. This is one of the big stories to continue watching, along with like silly season for NASCAR and crew chief silly season. One of the biggest things because of the new TV deal that's going to be coming into play is going to be media silly season. There are going to be people from networks and Fox and NBC that are going to be moving around and jumping around to different networks starting in 2025. And Dale Jr. is part of that. I think a lot of people would love to have Dale Jr. cover as many NASCAR Cup Series races as possible. And if it's true that Amazon really is the only front runner, that is going to be really disappointing because in my opinion, Dale Jr. needs to be on the TV more than 5 races. But at the same time, if he gets picked up by Amazon, that is going to be really, really huge because Dale Jr. is actually going to pay attention to what is going on out on the racetrack instead of looking at a screen. He's always done that many, many times. It is unfortunate, though, to see that Dale Jr. might only do 5 races. Now, this also could be a leverage play for Dale Jr. to get a lot more money to save with NBC. I think that they really would love to keep Dale Jr. because if NBC does not get Dale Jr. this year, I think that is a massive, massive loss for NBC. I'm not saying that the commentators they have up there are bad by any stretch of imagination, but Dale Jr. has lightened that booth up in a really big way. And I would consider him this generation's Benny Parsons when it comes to commentating races. And NBC really likes Dale Jr. I am ashamed, though, to see and frustrated to see that they don't have him currently signed at the moment, at least for this year. They should have given him a 1-year extension at this point, and then when we get to 2025, then you can decide what you want to do. But I would love for Dale Jr. to commentate most of the season, work with TNT, work with NBC, and work with Amazon. Obviously, with the booth they've got at Fox, there's no way he's going to go over there. And honestly, he was critical of the Fox broadcast earlier this evening, so he's probably never going to have a chance and opportunity to go work with Fox. But I really do hope that Dale Jr. is at least working with a company. And it sounds like Amazon might become a front runner. I think there's also a really strong chance and possibility that Dale Jr. does, in fact, end up staying with NBC and just goes at NBC and doesn't move to a different network. But imagine a booth in Amazon with like Carl Edwards, Dale Jr., Alan Bestwick. That would be my dream booth for Amazon or TNT, which again, I think Alan Bestwick is in the running to go somewhere as well. When it comes into media deals, even though it's only for 5 races potentially, Alan Bestwick should be in a commentary booth. And I think if he went to NBC, I think he would do an amazing job because Alan Bestwick is still good as a commentator and should be commentating races. And it blows my mind that Alan Bestwick is not right now commentating any sort of racing at the moment and instead is commentating other stuff because the SRX is no longer a thing at the moment. It doesn't sound like it's coming back. It is going to be a very interesting story to watch as we progress through this offseason. As we get to the start of the year, we're going to have a lot of announcements as the year progresses on what people are going to be working where. We'll keep an eye on the story as time progresses, and we'll make sure to watch us as time moves on when it comes to what broadcast networks might work on in 2025 and if Dale Jr. will be working with them in 2025. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot of talk and conversation surrounding Junior Motorsports and whether or not they are going to make the jump up to the Cup Series in the not-so-distant future. Well, on the Dale Jr. Down very recently with Ray Abraham, Dale Jr. revealed that he actually could have gotten a couple charters all the way back in 2018 and made the jump up the Cup in 2019. According to reports, those BK Racing charters were worth at the time, I think, $1 to $2 million. But Dale Jr., I think, revealed that he was not ready at the time to make the jump up to the Cup Series. It would have been really cool to see Dale Jr. make the jump up the Cup because obviously, like I mentioned quite a bit here, Dale Jr. has had a lot of interest in making the jump up the Cup. The first time we really had heard this information was all the way back in 2021 after Josh Berry picked up his first career Xfinity Series win. We had heard at the time that they were talking about moving up because of interest in the next-gen car. That obviously didn't happen in 2022. Then they didn't make the jump up in 23, and now they didn't make the jump up this past year in 24, and now there's a chance they may not jump up in 2025 because their charters are extremely expensive. He does realize that there is a lot of value in these next-gen charters because these charters are worth $40 million. And you can sell it off to the highest bidder and make a ton of money back, and you can use all that money to pay off some of your resources, among other things. I really believe Junior Motorsports should make the jump up the Cup, and here's why I think Junior Motorsports needs to make the jump up. Junior Motorsports and Dale Jr. is the biggest brand out there, and it's a shame that Dale Jr. can't make the jump up because of certain reasons with the charter. Dale Jr. is worth a lot of money, but again, it all comes down to money, and it's going to be the highest bidder. We know a lot of teams are trying to expand. 2311 Racing wants to expand to a third car at one point. We know that SHR might sell a charter, but we know Trackhouse is looking to get 4 charters. We certainly know Spire Motorsports, they like to expand. I'd imagine Farmer Motorsports, with the early sets they're having this year, they probably want to expand as well. And obviously, the only big way they could do is maybe a new manufacturer comes in. There's obviously a lot of talk that Honda could make the jump up to the Cup Series relatively sooner, join NASCAR in particular, which I think would be really huge for the sport if they were to make the jump into NASCAR. But again, I really wish that Junior Motorsports would have said, hey, we had an opportunity to come in, we could have gotten a charter, and again, with the next-gen car coming into play, I think if they chartered the next-gen car came in a few years too late and had the next-gen car been there a little sooner, I do believe that Dale Jr. would have absolutely been joining Cup. But as of right now, at this particular moment, they're not joining, which is really, really unfortunate because I believe Junior Motorsports 1,000% deserves to be in the NASCAR Cup Series, and they'd be successful, and they would be probably able to bring other drivers like Brandon Jones and Sam Mayer and Justin Allgaier and other drivers like Matt DeBenedetto up into the NASCAR Cup Series. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the charter system. Now, over the course of the last couple months, there's been a lot of talk and conversation surrounding the charter system. The teams in NASCAR have been at odds and ends over the course of the last few months because a charter agreement has not been finalized. Now, keep this in mind, a charter agreement does not technically have to be done till February of next year around the Daytona 500. But the teams in NASCAR are really hoping to get this charter agreement done sooner rather than later. The teams are wanting the charter system to be completely permanent, while NASCAR does, while they're not completely out of making it permanent, they're opening to basically having a cost cap coming into play. Over the weekend, it was reported by Adam Stern, a report that came out Saturday, that NASCAR is offering to extend the charter system for 7 years concurrent to its new media rights agreement. Now, the teams still want this charter system to be completely permanent. However, according to the report, they're actually open to potentially having an evergreen deal, meaning that they would get a little more money, but the charter system would not become permanent. Basically, from what the numbers have stated, that the teams are quintessentially wanting a lot more money. We had reports come out last week from Daytona that the teams quintessentially basically hired, I think, an antitrust lawyer to come into play to really try to help these teams out in a big way when it comes to the money. Now, do I think a deal is going to get done? Yes, eventually, absolutely. I do believe that a deal is going to get done when it comes to the charter agreement. And once that happens, I think a lot of silly season movement probably will end up happening, which I think will be really big for these teams overall in general. Again, this is a really, really big deal because, like I said, these teams, they really do want to have a media rights deal done. And again, I think everyone is extremely optimistic. And I don't think there's as much pessimism, though I know Denny Hamlin kind of said he's a little more pessimistic than Steve Phelps is, because Steve Phelps does believe that this charter system is going to get finalized and done. I didn't look really at the details on how much money that they're wanting, but again, I do believe the numbers are going to be around 50% is what they're wanting or close. I would imagine it'll probably be somewhere in the middle, and they'll probably get 45% of the money because, while yes, the teams, is because of the TV deal, it's going to be $1.1 billion, which is up from $840 million per year. It really isn't as big of an upgrade as people realize, because when you factor inflation into play, that does come in and plays a big factor into that. This is definitely a pretty big story to keep your eyes out on, though, because, like I've mentioned already said, I do believe a charter deal will get done. In my early prediction, when it comes to that charter agreement getting finalized, it's probably going to be in the middle to the later portion of this year, which I think will be really big and huge for the teams, especially if you're a fan of these teams. I think it'll be really, really huge. I'm on more of the side of being on the teams. I definitely am for sure, but I understand from NASCAR's position because of how kind of unknown these charters really are. I kind of understand from NASCAR's perspective too why they wouldn't want to make this charter system completely permanent. I get it. It's a lot more money that they're going to have to give out. But again,
they got also a lot more money. And again, I'm not saying that NASCAR really wants to get rid of these charters. They absolutely probably would not love to, they probably would love to get rid of them, or certain people, but the fact that they didn't go to meetings wasn't really great. But at least we do have a concurrent deal, which kind of goes with a current media rights deal. Sounds like it'd be a 7-year deal. Teams want to make it permanent. NASCAR sounds like isn't wanting to make it permanent currently at the moment. This is going to be the biggest story to watch throughout the year, and we'll keep an eye on this media rights deal situation, because I think this is overall a pretty huge deal overall, in my honest opinion, when it comes to the media rights agreement and the media rights deal. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Derek Kraus. As it was announced on Thursday that Derek Kraus will drive a 16 car for Kaulig Racing part-time in 2024. He'll drive at Las Vegas this weekend, then he'll race at Phoenix next week, and also the championship race as well. Then he's going to race at Kansas, then he'll race at Darlington, and then he'll race at Gateway, and like I mentioned, his final race will be the championship race at Phoenix. Derek Kraus did make quite a few select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series last year for Kaulig Racing, so while it's a little surprising to see that he's getting opportunity to run with the Steamman Cup, it's really not that surprising when you really think about it, because like I've already mentioned, Derek Kraus did drive for his organization in the Cup Series. And remember, he actually attempted to qualify for this organization when AJ Allmendinger was at Road America, and Derek Kraus substituted. While he didn't qualify very well, he did a pretty good job. Now, a few years ago, if you would have told me that Derek Kraus was going to be the guy replacing or substituting in the 16 car, I would have absolutely been extremely happy, because back in like 2018 and 19, there was a lot of hype surrounding this guy. Now, he's still relatively young. Derek Kraus, I think, is 23 or 24 years old, or turns 23 this year. So he's still relatively young, but he's not as young as some other drivers coming into play. And the biggest reason why Derek Kraus is getting this chance and opportunity to work with Kaulig Racing is because he's bringing in a lot of sponsorship and funding. That's why he's getting the chance to work with this team. We also know from information that came out that the rides that I think that Derek Kraus are running this year, I think a lot of those were supposed to be Matt DeBenedetto seats. In fact, I think Matt DeBenedetto was supposed to get a majority rides in the Summer 16 car this year. But obviously, like I've already mentioned before, that sadly did not end up happening, and it did not go through, which I think was really, really unfortunate. As for Derek Kraus, though, I think he is a good driver. Last year with the Kaulig Racing, I think he scored 3 top 10 finishes and actually got a stage win as well at Homestead Miami Speedway. I don't think he got a really good finish last year, though, but still, he did have some pretty good runs with Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series last year. And I think that Derek Kraus will have some decent runs, but man, I am worried about the future of Kaulig Racing for sure. I do think that they are going to sell a charter, because a lot of drivers that are driving for the team this year are paid, already part of the Kaulig Racing group. Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be in that seat for 6 races. You've got Josh Williams going to be in there for a select number of races. AJ is going to be in there for some races as well. And then, of course, you have Derek Kraus, who's driving for a couple weeks in that 16 car. Coming up over the course of the next 2 weeks, he's going to be behind the wheel. And also, of course, there's some other drivers who are going to get a chance and an opportunity. There's still some races that are to be determined and still need to be announced at this current moment on who will get behind the wheel of a 16 car. But going back to Derek Kraus, if you want my early predictions, I think Derek Kraus is going to do okay. I don't expect him to set the world on fire. I predict he'll finish in the top 20 in multiple races, but the 16 car, of course they did get a top 10 in the Daytona 500, but then Josh Williams sadly crashed out and didn't make the main event, so I'm a little worried about Derek Kraus' chances. I think Josh Williams, no disrespect to Derek Kraus, I think Josh Williams right now is a better driver than Derek Kraus, so I don't really expect Derek Kraus to really set the world on fire with Kaulig Racing this season. But again, it's a really great opportunity for him, and glad to see that he'll get the chance and opportunity to work with this team in 2024. I really hope that Derek Kraus can make the best out of it and run really strong with Kaulig Racing in the 2024 season in the Cup Series. And I also think that Derek Kraus will make some select Xfinity Series starts in the 10 car as well. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about StewartHaas Racing. Now, it was announced, I believe, on Friday that StewartHaas Racing, that NASCAR actually confiscated the roof rail deflectors on the number 10 and 41 cars for StewartHaas Racing. They are expected to be handed some pretty big penalties in the coming week, and they are going to be the first team that will be handed penalties in the NASCAR Cup Series this year and this season. Not only 2 weeks in, not even 2 weeks into the season, technically we are 2 weeks past now, but not even 3 weeks into the year, and StewartHaas Racing is already running into problems and running into trouble. This is an organization coming into this year that basically said, we do it our own way, and we're going to do this. Now, the one thing that could technically help StewartHaas Racing in this situation is the fact they do basically, this is not a single source part, which I think is going to help them here. However, even though it is a single source part that they were not a single source part, they still are probably going to be handed some pretty big penalties. Every single season, especially when we get to Atlanta Motor Speedway, that's generally when the big penalties start coming out. Let's go back to 2022. Brad Keselowski got handed, I think, like a 120-point penalty, if I'm not mistaken, and basically that ended their season of going for the regular season championship or making the playoffs. I think Kevin Harvick got hit by these same penalties. And then also I think Justin Haley got hit by these penalties. Last year you had Hendrick Motorsports that got hit by really big penalties. And last year, Kevin Harvick got a disqualification, and Chase Briscoe got hit by the biggest partious penalty for a single driver in the history with 120 points, which if you go back to the Winston Cup era, I think that's worth like 300 or 400 points. And that's worth almost 2 or 3 races in a row, which cost Chase Briscoe and cost them their season overall. Now, again, I don't think this is going to be an L3 penalty. I think at the worst, it's going to be an L2 penalty coming. I think at best for them, they're going to get an L1 penalty. Now, do I think they're going to try to appeal the penalty? Yes, but they're not going to win. They're basically just going to go to lowest for the L1, which I think the lowest for the L1 penalties are 20 to 30 points, which is still a lot, but it's not completely the end of the world, and your season isn't over. If you have like an L2 or L3 penalty, your season is going to be coming to an end, and your season is going to be coming to a close because there's no way you're going to make a comeback. And again, you think about StewartHaas Racing. This is a team that has a lot of pressure coming into this year. They're in their last year with Ford. They've lost Kevin Harvick. They lost Eric Almirola. They could have gotten drivers like Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch and, of course, Zane Smith and Michael McDowell and Todd Gillen. Even Haley Deegan had been mentioned for one of these seats at one point. But that, of course, never ended up happening. And they've got a good core lineup of drivers. Hell, Noah Gragson got a top 10 in the Daytona 500. And they've had some solid runs. And unfortunately, they didn't run great this week at Atlanta. I think all 4 SHR cars sadly wrecked out in this race. But what really is definitely disappointing for sure for SHR is the fact that we're in year 3 of this next-gen car. And I think that Greg Zepadelli is probably behind a lot of decisions that this team is making, and it's really affecting them. I really think that this is going to hurt SHR this season, is the fact that if they keep making mistakes like this, they're going to lose that work with Ford. And I think there's a good chance, like I said, because now you got Front Row, he's got a Tier 1 Technical Alliance now, there's a really strong chance and possibility that StewartHaas Racing is probably, and let's be honest and real, they're probably going to lose that Ford backing. And even if they stay with Ford, they're not going to be a Tier 1 team next season if they don't get it figured out. They obviously, if they start performing great, they may do it, but they have not really had a great start as a full organization this year. Hopefully Vegas continued the turning point for them, but again, they're going to be handed penalties probably this week, which is really an unfortunate situation for that team who did not need to get penalties, especially with them being so far behind as an organization compared to other organizations at the team. We'll see what penalties they do end up getting handed, and we'll see what penalties they do end up receiving. But again, I just right now feel bad for certain people at that team. There's good people that work at that organization, but it seems like there's kind of been a connection between Haas F1 and Gene Haas altogether, and now the fact that you've got StewartHaas Racing that is likely going to be handed some pretty massive and huge penalties, which again, that's in the rule book. Don't mess with these parts. Again, it's not a single source part, which might help them a little bit, but the fact they were messing with these parts and now they're going to get in trouble is really unfortunate for the people working at StewartHaas Racing who really have nothing to do with this kind of stuff. It's just unfortunate. They're probably going to be handed penalties, and it's not a good start to the year for this team. They basically said we do it our own way, and they're probably going to get mean when these penalties do come out because they kind of got mean during the off season with all the social media stuff they were posting. We know Tony Stewart was at the track today, but it seemed like it really didn't help because Noah Gragson wrecked the lap number 3, and Tony was with Noah trying to guide him. So we'll see what kind of penalties StewartHaas Racing does end up receiving from this, but it sounds like that StewartHaas Racing more than likely is going to be handed some pretty massive and major penalties that are going to be coming their way in the not-so-distant and the relative future. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, those go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. List below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. How much big do you think the penalty is going to be for StewartHaas Racing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the stories we talk about today on the channel, including Kraus will go into Kaulig? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, you're going to see the entry list for the race in Las Vegas for the Pennzoil 400, and you're also going to see potentially the Truck Series race picks video, but that might not come out till Wednesday. There'll be a NASCAR news video on Wednesday as well, and there'll be a lot of content dropping as we get close to the week, as we head to Las Vegas. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.